But I feel like, perfect. I feel like an honorary member of the Colorado School of Public Health because we take on a lot of students from there and hire a lot of people from there too. So we've had probably about 10 practicum and capstone students from Colorado School of Public Health, Colorado State, Northern Colorado, and we've been really happy with the quality of students. And so I run Colorado Public Health Associations. Well, no, sorry, there are some other people that post on it, but I do most of the LinkedIn posting for Colorado School of Public Health. And so we are presenting today on LinkedIn, as well as the larger picture of just how to find a job in public health. So we'll talk about LinkedIn, resumes, some things you've already heard. Hopefully some of them are new. And I have my colleague here, next slide, Rhiannon Strait, who will introduce herself.
All right, thank you, JK. Can everyone see the screen okay? I know we're doing a hybrid format here, so I'm hopeful that folks can see us and hear us. I appreciate the thumbs up to Jenny. Thank you, Jenny. Hello, as JK said, I'm Rhiannon. I am a behavioral health consultant with the Stedman Group, and I am a graduate of the Colorado School of Public Health. I graduated in May of 2020, right when the pandemic hit, and mad props to Colorado School of Public Health for making that virtual pivot to online learning so quickly. But one of my favorite parts of this job with the Stedman Group is how much we do engage with MPH students. And so I am quite happy to be here and hopefully can pass along some tips and tricks that helped me in my ability to find this job that I love so much with the Stedman Group.
And as you see here, we're a pretty awesome firm. We do a lot of things right. I think we're all virtual, all home office. We're a women-owned business. We are almost a B Corp, a public benefit corporation. Still working on that, and we help low-income, uninsured people to get care through our specialty that you see in the bottom left. So we really, some people have done this before, but apply population health ideas and principles to behavioral health, which is relatively new. And actually, I kind of helped a little bit with the behavioral health specialty at the School of Public Health. So I think now that's a full-fledged MPH program, community behavioral health, I think they call it, or behavioral health and wellness, I think.
That's closer, almost there.
It's good, yeah, it's closer. And so, we are not traditional public health workers, and that, you generally think of county public health or state public health, but very much consider ourselves in the public health private sector realm. And so we'll talk a little bit about that too, in addition to how to find a job more generally.
All right, well, I will go ahead and move us forward into our agenda. So we've got 4 main things to cover today. The first is some general tips on finding jobs. We'll go through networking, what sites to look at, and how to navigate strong follow-up. Then we'll talk a little bit about building a presence, both on LinkedIn and generally speaking, as you step into your professional career. Then we'll review some specifics necessary to applying successfully, like cover letters and resumes. And then we hope to leave time for questions. And I would also just note here, we are happy to answer questions throughout the presentation. If you want to raise your hand or add something in the chat, we will both monitor that. We want this to be collaborative and fun for everyone. So don't be shy. If you've got something to say, let's chat it out together.
And we'll try to leave at least 15 minutes at the end for questions. But again, feel free to just bring them up when they come up.
Okay, so with that, I will move us into our first section, finding jobs. And I'm curious if this video clip is going to work with the hybrid situation. We're going to give it a shot. If it doesn't work, it was just a joke. No big loss if it doesn't. So pause for dramatic effect.
Yeah, it never works.
It never works, right?
It never work. Okay, this is actually the moral of the story today. It's not about finding a job. Videos never work on Zoom, so just don't do it.
If anyone is an It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia fan, this is a classic episode where Charlie talks about finding jobs that grow on job trees and he gets fired out of a job cannon. And it's very relatable, having been a student recently. When everyone says, hey, what do you want to do? Where do you want to work? Have you found a job? I know this can be a really overwhelming question and an overwhelming time as well. So just know that we've got jokes. We just can't share them virtually. And with that, I will go ahead and move forward.
All
JK,
right.
when is you?
Yeah. And so the first thing, and this is something we kind of want to start chronologically, right? And these all happen in an interwoven fashion, but think about things that you can do if you just started in public health school, if you're not even in public health school yet. And this continues when you're employed, right? General networking is super important. And really you can start this before your capstone. And I would say you should start this well before your capstone, because I waited, I really didn't even start networking until I finished my MPH, which was a huge mistake, because, the lead time, this is a relationship developing opportunity, right? Some of you will get jobs based on applications. A lot of you will get jobs based on networking, right? And so this can't be overemphasized. And I would spend a significant amount of time, an hour or two a week at least, just doing general networking, not really even looking at a particular position, but looking at organizations that might be in your future or might know more about what you might do in your future. And there's a few categories of that. Some of them are more obvious. I think some are less obvious. And I'll tell my story of how I got my job through networking. 100% applications had nothing to do with me getting my current job, and actually I don't know that I've ever applied for a job traditionally and gotten it. Doctors don't really apply for jobs either. And so, this can't be overstated. So you've got professional organizations. CPHA is a great example. And within those, they have specific networking opportunities. CPHA has two conferences actually that are great networking opportunities. CPHA did and probably will come back to, we used to do some networking happy hours and things like that in Denver that were really well attended. And COSOFI is the Colorado Society for Public Health Educators. There are also non-professional organizations, and I would not discount these either. They're a little more general in their interest. Some of them tend towards sales types. And so you might not find the exact person you're looking for, but I'm in Toastmasters, which has the added benefit of being a public speaking club. You also learn how to run meetings too, which is a really beneficial skill when you get into public health. And so I will plug Toastmasters. There's other organizations like Rotary. They tend to be a little bit older, sometimes retired folks, but guess what? Older and retired folks are managers and directors and CEOs who might employ you. And so I think it's good if you're into that, especially if you're an extrovert, to join some non-professional organization for more general networking, as well as the other benefits of it. A lot of them are community interest organizations, volunteer organizations. You have alumni networks. So grad school, Colorado School of Public Health being that for some of you. Don't forget undergrad and even high school. I actually found my job more through my undergrad network of people here in Colorado than any of my grad school networks, despite being a lot more recent. Having graduated from public health school in 2016 and med school in 2008, it was my undergrad that I graduated from in 2003, 2004 that really founded my job. And so within those, there are Facebook groups, LinkedIn groups, email groups, specific profession groups. Especially in big schools, you might have a specific medical focus or public health focused group within your alumni group, especially if it's a local university. And so get into as many of those that are as specific as you can. And then also through personal life, right? Things like your hobbies. My rowing club actually now has a LinkedIn group that is geared at professional networking through the rowing club, through LinkedIn. I can tell you from being president of our alumni group, the number one thing people want to do outside of like socializing with their friends is professional networking. Like, it's so popular. And I think that will return now that we're getting back to some in-person things, you're going to see in-person networking return with a force. So get out there and meet people. I really think there's no way to do it like in person. And side jobs, we'll talk a little bit about the intersection of jobs and new jobs in a second, but taking a little, couple hour a week thing can turn into another job. So anything you do can be a lead into a job, right? It just depends if you're looking for it.
A couple of quick things to add on to this slide. When I was an MPH student, I worked as a manager and bartender at a brunch restaurant. And I often found myself feeling a little bummed or less than some of my peers at school who had public health related jobs already. But let me tell you what, the conversations that I was able to have as a server with the people who would come into my restaurant, just being passionate about public health and passionate about this career that I was trying to build and develop. All of the folks that you serve have jobs and networks and lives that you can tap into as well. So don't be shy talking about what you love and what you're doing in school. It can pay off. I actually had a little notepad in my server book where I would take people's contact information and then follow up later if they were connected to public health, or I'm a community and behavioral health specialist. So lots of community building opportunities in something like a side job. So don't count those out.
And I would add on to that. Now I'm in a position where I'm the person doing the hiring. And so I am always looking for talented people in adjacent fields to public health, especially acknowledging that there's not great diversity in some traditional public health hiring routes, and that I may find somebody who would make a great consultant who maybe it was we do a lot of work in criminal justice. So a formerly incarcerated person is not likely to come to me through traditional public health routes. And so I talked to a guy at a fundraiser. It turned out he was formerly incarcerated. He and his wife ran a nonprofit. And then I talked to him. I was like, hey, you seem like you might be good at this. What are your interests in talking about health consulting? And now we're looking at maybe contracting with them. So yeah, I can't emphasize enough that anything could be a potential job. And I'll tell my story real quickly about this. So like I said, graduated and then started my job search. Big mistake. I'd give at least 6 months of specific job search, and then 6 or 12 months of general networking before that, to try to find a job. Like, you can work while you finish your public health degree. And I just didn't think about that. So as I did that, I had a capstone at the Harm Reduction Action Center. That was really helpful. I met some people that way. I reached out through my college alumni network, and I met a guy in the Society of Physician Entrepreneurs, and he set me up with another guy who was a local entrepreneur, who's a Harvard grad, who told me about his neighbor who ran a healthcare consulting firm. And at this point, I was like, oh my gosh, just like meeting people. And that is my current, she was my employer, and now we're co-owners of the consulting business. And so it was just going down the line, following up with people when they told me to follow up with somebody, and found, honestly, the best job I can imagine. And so, like I said, I've never successfully applied to a job other than Papa John's. And so I think a lot of people probably fall into that boat, especially after they, have some success in their career. You will have any number of job opportunities after you have success in your first career. And Eric says, thanks for hosting. Have any advice on how to select the right mentor in your field? Great point. So mentoring is something we totally didn't put in here, but the main thing I'd say about mentoring is, we kind of talk about mentoring like it's a one-on-one and you're matched kind of for life with this person. I have, even now in my career, several people I would call mentor. Some of them I've asked specifically, will you mentor me? Other people happen more organically. None of them came to me through a mentoring program, right? These are people, I'm doing reasonably well in my career, but I still seek out people that I want to be like, and ask them, like, hey, will you mentor me in this? And often, again, they're in adjacent fields. Like, I have a researcher that I want to learn more about research, right? So ask her, will you mentor me? And you said, what should you keep in mind for when you're willing and able to mentor someone else later in your career. Yeah, and this is how we do this with students, is like mentoring later in career. For us, we start that through formal channels like Capstone, and it's really up to students. I really like some of our students, but I want them to put in some more emphasis on mentoring. And so how long our relationship goes is really dictated by them. I can still keep up with some Capstone students. I hire some. And I think there's this might seem accurate, but this idea like it's just temporary or something, like I am willing to talk to anyone for any length of time. They can be 10 years down the road. If they email me, I'm happy to help them. And I would just, like you said, keep that up from early career, right? So I started taking on Capstone students, and now new hires take on a Capstone student right away, right? So it's not like, oh, you need to wait 5 or 10 years in your career to have a mentee or to take on a practicum student. I mean, do it right away, right? You remember, my employees remember what it's like to be a practicum or Capstone student a lot better than what I do, right? And so they're able to really help people navigate the application process for Capstone, practicum, and the process of getting it done. And now we have 4 different resources or 5 different resources for our Capstone students rather than just one, because everybody helps out and gives their expertise. So thanks for the questions, Eric.
Yeah, I would just quickly add, for folks who are in school right now, for me, mentors while I was an MPH student were professors that I connected with kind of more naturally, like just a relationship that came naturally to me. And then I took it upon myself to follow up and try to get more involved. So a big help for me in terms of identifying a mentor that really played out and worked out for me was listening to what felt good when I was communicating with a professor or a teacher, and then following up afterwards. So professors can be incredible mentors, especially if you just kind of hit it off right away.
All right. So sites, this slide will be a lot faster. Like I said, I tend to kind of downplay the more formal traditional application process. That said, there are plenty of people that get their jobs through sites. We use Indeed. We used to use Indeed. I probably wouldn't do it again from a hiring perspective. You end up generating a lot of applications, but they're not great. Monster. LinkedIn is probably a little bit better. There are definitely less listings on LinkedIn, but you can get a better idea of how you know people. Whereas with Indeed and Monster, you're mostly just sending up an application off into the blue. And so, I would do these. I wouldn't put a lot of emphasis into this. I wouldn't spend the majority of my time trolling Indeed and Monster for jobs in public health. For professional type jobs, this is probably not my number one. Alumni job sites are going to be a lot higher yields, right? People put those directly. They sent them to your alumni director. Usually they're more likely to be local or people with a pipeline to your school. We send our jobs to school public health job listing, and we know that they're going to send them out right away, and people are going to see them, and we're going to get applications, and they're going to be high quality. And so I get far fewer but far higher quality applications when I send them to alumni listings. And now we have relationships with other schools too. And getting on email lists, this is not exactly a site, but a lot of jobs will come out, not just through an alumni site, but through a professional site. 2 of them that we use, and this, you need to find these for yourselves based on what you want to go into, are the Colorado Consortium for Prescription Drug Abuse Prevention. We're in substance use and mental health. They put out a list of projects, grants, jobs, both with them and partner organizations very frequently. And then the Office of Behavioral Health sends out a list. Large government bureaus have multiple jobs at any given time. So like, public health, CDPHE probably has a job list that they email out every week, I would imagine. I'm not on it right now, but that's a great idea. If you're job seeking, that's, again, direct line to jobs that you want. And then finally, the last one is large employer sites, right? Small employers probably don't have the bandwidth or the number of jobs to do this, but places, if you're more in a healthcare type setting, places like Centura, University of Colorado, SCL Health, Those all employ public health type people, and they're all, huge employers with, I don't know, 10,000 employees. And so these are all, I know you're going to spend a lot of time sifting through emails, but you can unsubscribe from these after you get a job, right? So get on as many of these email lists as you can, because they're much higher quality than these general job sites like Indeed and Monster.
One more.
And oh yeah, LinkedIn. We'll talk much more extensively about LinkedIn later, but go ahead.
One more quick tip from my experience in trying to navigate these job sites. When I started my job search, I would go to a place like Indeed or LinkedIn, and you get to like the search bar and it says, what type of job do you want to find? And you're like overwhelmed and frozen because you don't know how to define what type of job you want to find. Just start somewhere with a jargony word that you identify with, and then skim through a couple of the jobs that pop up and look at the language in those job postings to give you other ideas to plug into their search bar. So sometimes your own brain gets stuck with like a few hot words and you only can pull up so many types of jobs in that way. If you diversify the search and try to use language that you see in other jobs that resonate with you, you'll be surprised at how many different things come up from like a tiny tweak on a phrase, behavioral health instead of mental health and wellness or something like that. So get crafty with the words you use when you do utilize job sites like this. All right, so next we wanted to talk a little bit about follow-up. When you are networking, this is essential. Networking is nothing without strong follow-up, right? So we wanted to provide some tips and tricks for what makes strong follow-up. I would say always, no matter how big or small the connection was, send a thank you after the meeting or conversation. Gratitude goes a long way in today's world. And be quick about it. I would say like 24-hour turnaround time. A lot of folks who are doing informational interviews and participating in networking events and looking for people to hire, they do this a lot, and they see a lot of people. So it is kind of easy to forget about interaction. So don't let them forget about who you are. JK is a real stickler about this, and now I'm becoming a stickler about this. Proofread. Don't send an email with grammar mistakes or spelling issues. If you need to use something like Grammarly or have a friend or partner proofread, do so. It makes a big difference. Another great thing to do is remember small details from conversations or communications that you had with people. Maybe they mentioned that they were about to host an event, or they had a personal celebration coming up. If you take a little mental note of that or write it down somewhere, this is a great way to re-engage with the person if you don't really have a reason to re-engage with them. And it's just another thing that keeps them familiar with you and thinking about you. So if they are interested in hiring or they do need some extra support, you might be the first person that comes to mind over someone that just sent a quick follow-up email after a conversation. Utilize LinkedIn. JK will talk about this extensively in a little bit. I also wanted to mention that often in these networking conversations or informational interviews, as a student, I was going into them expecting this job or awesome opportunity to come out of each and every one of them. And that's not the case. And that's also not fair to them. And it's not gonna help you in your job hunt at all. So think about this as a way to give to the folks who are talking to you, and try to minimize your expectations. You know that you have a lot to give to an organization or an individual, but don't expect the world out of a networking event. First and foremost, you really do have to build up to something like this. And lastly, use the power of one connection to open many doors. Don't forget that when you're talking to a human, you are essentially talking to their entire network as well, and vice versa. So when a human is talking to you, if you know someone in your network who might be able to take on a challenge that they're encountering, connect them there. They'll remember that, and then they'll repay the favor.
And again, I have a really good example of this. The follow-up is everything. So I met my current co-owner, and it was December, I think it was December 19th of 2016. And we got set up by this third degree connection. And she was so enthusiastic, like, oh my gosh, I would love to hire you. Great, we'll get business cards printed. And oh, why don't you come to my house for a solstice party in a couple days? Which, like, current employees don't get invited to the solstice party. So I thought, oh my gosh, I'm in. This is so awesome. And went to the solstice party. Everything went great. Met all our friends, met her husband, and it was like, wow, I can't believe I got this job. Followed up about 3-4 days later, nothing. Followed up a month later, quick response. Followed up another month later, kept following up, and she kept the door open, kept saying, I'm waiting for something. And what I didn't know is that how her consulting company worked was really more on a project basis, right? So she didn't hire full-time people, which is kind of what we're all thinking. So like, somebody's just going to give me a full-time contract. And a lot of places work like that. Some don't. And so really it was somewhere around June, I think it was like June 1st. So about 6 months later, she called me on a Sunday and said, what are you doing? Can you start work tomorrow? And I said, well, sure. And she said, how much can you work? And I said, as much as you want. And she said, okay, you can work, 100 hours a week for the next 6 weeks. And I said, okay, hadn't worked for 6 weeks. All right. And so I started working, worked as much as I possibly could for 6 weeks. And at the end of 6 weeks, they were like, oh, we love what you do. We want you to be on board. And so, the tryout is really important. And so I'd say, don't get frustrated. Somebody keeps saying to stay in touch, take them at face value. I know a lot of people don't want to say no, but a lot of people are just waiting for the right opportunity. I have a couple people in my mind right now that I'm waiting for us to get a contract that they could work on so I can hire them. And so, yeah, keep following up. This is the thing about, like, getting a job just has to happen once, right? You could have a bunch of people that think you're annoying, but if there's one person that hires you, you're fine, right? So test the boundaries of your willingness to be persistent in this process. It's something that's really served me well as I've gotten into the workforce, and that I still, somebody says, hey, we want to work with you. Hey, have you read my proposal? Hey, have you read my proposal? Then I have Rhiannon email them and say, hey, have you read our proposal? And often on the 5th time, they'll say, oh yeah, your email is at the bottom of my pile and I was on vacation, and thanks for sending this. Yeah, we want to hire you. So persistence is really important, and you may annoy a couple people, but they're the people that don't matter.
Friendly reminder to the women on the call, you're not annoying for sending a bunch of emails. I struggled with this immensely. I always felt guilty or bad about bugging people. You're not bugging them. You're trying to build your professional career and offer them the great brain that you have on your shoulders. So no matter who you are, you're not bugging them. You're valuable. Keep trying. Okay, let's move forward here. The next thing we're going to talk about is building a presence. And first up is LinkedIn. Yeah,
so building a presence is more than just like an online presence. It's really how do you become somebody that somebody wants to hire, right? And obviously for a lot of you, formal education is part of that. Your work experience is a big part of that. Those are really big things. But again, I also don't, there are plenty of people out there with lots of potential that don't have great formal work experience, that don't have formal education. And so how can you build your presence outside of that, or in addition to that, right? I mean, for me, my presence is both about formal education. Obviously, I've got a lot of formal education, but also life experience, right? So I'm a person in recovery, and that informs everything we do and work. And has, really is probably as much of my presence as my doctorate is. So things like that, and especially, right now I emphasize mental health and substance use because that's what we do. People who are willing to share that are really important to me, and get a little leg up in hiring. So, building your presence outside of those formal channels is just as important, right? And so one way to do that publicly is through LinkedIn. There's no other social media for professionals. I know people are in creatives, maybe Twitter or Insta or something like that, but really for more, more formal employment settings, healthcare, public health, LinkedIn's really it, unless you're in like communications or something, which is fine. But LinkedIn is free for everyone. You can pay for premium, but I honestly don't think it's really that worth it. Maybe you could use that during your formal job search, but I think the free one is just fine. Make sure it's really well updated. During your job search, you should be updating this every few weeks, every month, with degrees, open to work, that little green thing that says open to work. I pay a lot of attention to that. It doesn't dissuade me if somebody doesn't have that, but when I see that, I think, oh, that's somebody, and it says like public health, open to work. I take a look at what they do and contact them if I'm interested. Make sure your resume is on your LinkedIn page. I want to be able to find that right away. Make sure your skills are up to date, particularly hard skills. So things like EPI, things like data science, even things like Excel or advanced PowerPoint skills. Like I want to see those, and so make sure you update those things really well. It does help to get, when I see a recommendation on LinkedIn, people don't do this very often. I really like that. So ask people for recommendations on LinkedIn. And then the other thing, to raise your profile is post a lot. And all I do, I'll tell you the secret to my posting. I post like at least five things a day. All I do is cut and paste the address, put that into the post. It gives you a picture from the news article. I do just a screen grab. I cut some piece of text from the article. So I rarely write anything original. I put that at the top and I put a bunch of hashtags like prevention, public health, health equity. And I post that to my account. I post to our STEM group account, and I post it to CPHA. So I post it in 3 different places, and that whole process takes 30 seconds per article, like 45 seconds per article. And I get hundreds of views a day, thousands of views a day on posts. And without fail, when people introduce me, they say his LinkedIn profile is fire. And it's been a big part of success, and that like people from all over the nation now get in touch with me about substance use stuff. And I had a couple big posts. They were like personal things that had to do with our business. And one of them got 220,000 views or something. And I talked to a social media guy, and he was like, dude, you're like top 1% of 1%. And that alone, 2 of my posts by themselves have led to work engagements, public speaking, all kinds of stuff. And so this takes a long time to build. But if you're going to be in the field for a long time, you might as well start it now. Lisa says, I've heard some negative views about the open to network thing. I haven't seen open to network. I've seen open to work. I assume that's what you're talking about, the little green circle that says open to work. I've not heard any negative views about it. For me, but I'm a potential employer, and none of my current employees have that little green thing, because if they did, then maybe I'd be like, oh, what's going on here? But really, like, people change jobs and stuff, and somebody wanted to move on, I would say, hey, let me know, I'll write you a letter. And so I don't see any negatives, especially if you're not unemployed looking for jobs. I don't see any downside to it. If you're referring to it like looking thirsty, like, oh, I need a job. I don't think that's, yes. I don't buy into that. I want it. It's easy for me to tell if somebody's open to work. I have definitely messaged people who didn't have that and been like, hey, I'm interested in you. Tell me if you're interested. But I would be many times more likely to get in touch with somebody who said open to work. And no, not having a job doesn't dissuade me. Right. Yeah. If you don't tell people what you need, a lot of people wouldn't message somebody if they knew they're employed somewhere else, because they feel like they were stepping on someone's toes. I generally view our jobs as a step up. And so I'm totally willing to say, hey, I know you work somewhere else, but let's talk. You can have open work only show up on recruiter version. Interesting. I didn't know that. Posting and not getting likes.
I have a comment about this.
I got no time for that. You know, somebody doesn't like my stuff, fine. I get plenty of views every day. And if you don't, you know, nobody notices that.
Yeah, I would also add it's kind of a numbers game, and JK's LinkedIn is a great example of this. Some of the things that he posts don't get any likes or any comments, but other things will get a ton, and those ones are worth it. And I see all of them, and I don't think any less of a post that doesn't get likes. I would say, again, proceed forward and don't let that get in your head. It's a numbers game. Keep them rolling.
Yeah. And Lisa said, how do you recommend writing a LinkedIn headline? Like I said, I just do a cut and paste from the article. One reason I do that is because it's easy and I don't have to think. The other reason, which I found out later, is sometimes people will say, oh my gosh, you posted that article and do you believe this thing? And I say, no, all I did was cut and paste from the article, right? I'm not making any commentary. I very rarely make any commentary because I don't want to upset anybody. And so I can just say, hey, look. And so what I do is I take something that's not duplicating the headline, because they get the headline when you post the address. So I take some like secondary but interesting detail that's like 2 to 3 lines long, because that's as much as you can read in a LinkedIn post. And I just post that in quotes. And that's all I do. And so that's my, yeah, no, it's not, I'm not endorsing anything I post most of the time, because we post pretty controversial stuff about substance use. It's just for people to read. And if they want to comment on it, great, we'll comment back. So that's my take on posting.
Okay.
Again, this all comes back to, all you need is one person to like you enough to hire you. Like, you can be highly controversial. You could post things people don't like. You could get blacklisted. You need that one person to hire you. And again, you want the right person to hire you too.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and move us forward.
So other things to do, other than post on LinkedIn, you know, there's a lot of ways to get noticed. And these all these all take time, right? More so than LinkedIn. And one thing I would encourage you to do, like I had a part-time job when I was looking for my current job. I see. Okay, did not realize you were talking about that thing. I'll come back to that. But these things get a little bit more hours intensive. And so one thing I'd encourage you to do, especially if you have a part-time job, is I had a part-time job at which I made X amount per hour. And I would always say, you know, if I feel like something is not worth this amount per hour to me, then I'm not going to do it, because otherwise I could do this part-time job and make a little bit more money. And you know, this does risk like turning everything into dollars. But when you're developing your brand, you know, if you want to call it that, your professional interest, think about put your time in things that are worth the most, right? And so giving talks is a really good way to get people to know you. If you can, giving talks establishes you as an expert, even if you don't feel like it. Right now we're giving a talk. Am I the greatest resume builder, job finder? No, not at all, right? It worked for me once and I got the right job, and I'm going to stick with it for a really long time, right? And so give plenty of talks. If anybody will listen, give talks. And the thing is, as I got, you know, more successful, I'd say, well, you know, I will give talks, but there's got to be, you know, this many people there, or it's got to be like really narrowly in my field. So you can start to narrow this a little bit more as you get into your field. Group projects are really helpful. You'll have a deliverable that you can put on LinkedIn, send out after an interview or something. I love to see samples of people's work, writing, you know, projects. Tells me what they're going to do when they work at my company, right? And so that's a really good investment of time. Organize meetings, right? This gets you in front of people. If you have some extra time, organizing meetings is tough, but running a good meeting is a great way to get in front of people. And then extracurriculars, you asked about volunteering, Eric. So this is one I mean, obviously you should volunteer if you like to do something. I don't look through volunteer and say, I volunteer a lot, like a lot. And I don't look through volunteers and say, oh, they volunteer a lot, they're going to be a great employee. What I do like is when people volunteer in the field in which they're professional, that tells me like, that's kind of like job experience. And so, when I see people who are really dedicated and they love whatever data science or epi or something like that, and they volunteer in that field, like I volunteer in substance use and mental health related causes because that's just what I love to do. And a lot of my life from like sun up to sundown is doing substance use and mental health stuff. And so it's very obvious, look at my resume, that my volunteer and my professional activities align really strongly. I interviewed a kid for college and he loved robots and robotics, and he didn't get in, but I recommended him so highly because everything he did was volunteering, was robotics classes. He volunteered to teach kids robotics. He just loved doing robotics. And I'm like, this guy's going to be really good at robotics someday. Like, we should let him in. Like I said, he didn't get in, but I really wish he did, because I thought, well, gosh, he's going to love to do this forever. And then public meetings also. So go to like professional meetings. I, in my first couple of years, would go to all the meetings where they talked about opioid prescribing guidelines. I had no job, no professional interest, but I went and I talked and I heard people talk and I said hello, and networked with people. And so all of these things help to build your presence in the field. And I would just say some of these things, and this is another aspect where volunteering can be helpful, will become part of your job. So this is a great example. I am on a lot of boards and I've always been on a lot of boards. It started when I had no job and I was like, well, I guess I should be on a board because I don't have much to do. And I became pretty good at being on boards. Mainly you just participate. It's really easy. And I learned about board governance and finances of nonprofits. And now we got so good at, we get paid to do that. And so we actually get contracts to help nonprofits in substance use and mental health develop their business. And it's both rewarding and that it's like volunteering, except we get paid for it. And so some of those skills you develop in your extracurriculars and volunteers, you won't even know, but they will translate into your job really well.
And I just wanted to reiterate the importance of group projects. I know when you're an MPH student, sometimes this is like a massive eye roll headache. We all hated group projects, but I think that a specific group project that I did during my MPH program is a big reason why I have this job today. And I will tell you why. I was in a community and behavioral health practice-based learning course where we had to work with a community partner and essentially kind of solve a community partner's problem together in a small group. And I worked very closely with my now colleague, Lindsay Houston. And she was a year ahead of me in the MPH cohort. So we got through this group project together. It was a massive lift. Like maybe one of the hardest things that I did in my graduate program, but we got through it and we worked really well together. And then Lindsay graduated and we didn't honestly stay connected. I hadn't heard much about her. And then maybe 6 to 9 months down the line, I saw a job opportunity to be a part-time grant writer at an organization called the Stedman Group. I'd never heard of the Stedman Group. I'd never done grant writing before. However, I knew I was a strong writer and I was qualified for a couple other reasons. And so I submitted a writing sample and it got blindly edited or graded. And I, with my writing skills, kind of rose to the top. But then once they looked at who I was, it just so happened that the people looking were JK and Lindsay Houston. So she saw my name and she was like, holy hot dogs, I've worked with her and we worked really well together and I think we should hire her. And I, sorry, boss, sorry, JK, actually found out from Lindsay that I got the job before I even got the formal email or job offer. So I had no idea that group project was going to pay off in the way that it did. And I find myself grateful for it every day that I do this job that I love so much. Just quick check in the chat. Okay, JK is going to come back to headlines in a bit. I'm going to move us forward. So next, we're going to talk a little bit about applying and some of the things that go into applying for a job. First on deck are cover letters. So what you see here on your screen is my formula for writing a strong cover letter. You got 3 paragraphs. So we all have to write a bajillion cover letters when you're applying to all these things. If you stick to this formula and tailor it to each job, it has proven successful for me. So in the intro paragraph, the first paragraph that you write, you want to focus on the organization and show them why you're interested. Couple tips here are to show the organization in this first paragraph that you're familiar with them, like maybe you've reviewed their website, so you can talk about a specific thing that they do from the website. Make sure that they know that you're doing your back research. Paragraph number 2, the body, this really highlights your relevant experience. And I think a common pitfall for folks is to just copy and paste things from their resume. Do not do that. They are going to look at your resume, so you want this to be different from your resume. You also want to just really succinctly highlight what you can do for the company and how your skills and experience will benefit them specifically. This means this section really needs to be tailored to the job description. Look at the bullets of expectations that they say and tweak your cover letter to literally address those bullets with specific experience that you bring to the table. And then paragraph number 3 is your closing. I am probably more passionate than I should be sometimes, but I like to call this a passionate summary. Keep it simple, but express gratitude and make it very clear what you want. I'm hungry for this job, and this is why you should pick me. So that is my quick and easy formula for cover letter. JK, do you have anything to add on this slide before I move us forward?
Just, I know it takes a lot of time to write an individualized cover letter, but I would not, even if I thought somebody didn't know what we did, especially, and it's hard to tell what we do. Like, it's not clear. Really, if you're really interested in a job and it's a cold application, I would try to go through LinkedIn, find somebody that works with the organization or somebody that knows the organization, and really write it specific to them. Because if I got the idea somebody didn't know what we did, we get enough applications that I wouldn't pay attention to it.
To Eric's point in the chat about having an applicant leave the name of another organization in their cover letter, I will remind you of our second or third slide to proofread.
Yeah.
Some simple things, you know. All right, so next we want to talk a bit about resumes. This is a topic that is over discussed in undergrad and grad school, and everyone has something to say about how to write a good resume. So we wanted to highlight some common issues. As we just kind of talked about in the cover letter, including unrelated work experience is a big thing to avoid. So I know it's a headache, but tailor your resume to each job that you're applying for, even if it's a handful of bullet points that you're, copy and pasting out from a different resume. That's all good. Avoid using generalizations. You want to give specific examples. So there's a little picture in the bottom right of the screen that you see that shows the difference between a good experience bullet point and a bad experience bullet point. Think about things like SMART goals, where you really put an amount or a time period or a specific achievement, not just that you helped navigate a thing, be specific. References aren't always included on a resume, but if they are, they're usually pretty specific about what they want. Follow your directions and make sure that you include the right amount or the right relevant references to the job you're applying for. This we've hit on a bit, but don't use the same resume for all your job applications. We can just tell when that is done. And make sure that you spend a little bit of time on your resume summary, the blurb up top. It's the first thing people read, and sometimes it's a great way to grab the employer. Okay, we've got a couple more to go through here. Describing a job duty instead of a professional accomplishment. Everyone knows that you have to write in Word or PowerPoint. However, they don't know that you presented a PowerPoint presentation at Public Health in the Rockies. Get more specific. The next bullet, I battled this immensely. Is your resume too long or is it too short? We will go through specific examples of this here in the next few slides. keep it to 1 or 2 pages. I know folks sometimes feel like 2 pages is even too long. So I would say the shorter, the better. Edit out the stuff. Proofread, proofread, proofread. I'm just going to keep repeating that. Make sure that you're using a professional email address. If you're still using your like hotmail.com email address from high school, I won't give specific examples of, you got to make a new one. Use your school email address, find a professional email address to use. And then the last one here is really specific to public health. Watch your jargon. If you've got acronym soup throughout your resume, it's going to be frustrating to get through. And so make sure that you are choosing language that is fitting to the job and clarifying anything that might not be publicly known. JK, thoughts, anything to add before we move into some examples?
Yeah, I mean, I would just reiterate the tangible things and grammatical and formatting. You know, I would rather have a resume that said 2 things that they could quantify, that they, you know, that we would talk about in an interview that were relevant to our business, over a page full of you know, banalities. You know, saying, yeah, developed a new sales strategy generating, well, I mean, I hope this sales strategy generates a little more than $4,000 in revenue, but you'll see a good example, I think, on my resume. Yeah, oh, okay, you did this thing and here's what it did, and it had an effect on your bottom line, right? You can say all you want, that you're a good team player, that you know, manifest whatever, and that just doesn't matter to me. Anybody can say that. And then the other one on the next page is spelling and grammar. You know, we're not communications professionals, but we do a lot of communications, written and oral. And, you know, honestly, anything beyond like a very minor mistake, I would totally dismiss somebody's resume. And again, I realize this gets into like equity issues where, you know, there are people with lots of talent who don't have grammar skills. But generally to me, especially through like a graduate school level person, that tells me that you're sloppy with communications. And I mean, I rarely send a text message that's not grammatically perfect with good punctuation and capitalization. And I realize like I'm a stickler on this, but this, I can't emphasize enough. If you have one shot to impress somebody, that's a good way to do it, right? So yeah, look it over and look it over again, and have somebody else look it over if it's a job that you really care about. Ooh, how to slim down a CV? Great question. So I mean, CV, resume. Usually, I think a CV is more like a doctor thing, but we'll call CV and resume the same thing. Oh, so you differentiate CV. I don't know how to differentiate CV and resume. Like I said, CV I think of as a more academic thing. It includes all your publications, all your talks and stuff like that. And frankly, I've seen doctors who were not particularly impressive, who had a CV that was like 10 pages long because they included every time they gave a talk to a group, which, like, not to brag, but if I included every talk I gave, I couldn't do it. Like, the CV would be too long, and you know, that's not really a big deal. So the way you can see it, this is I'm very ready to talk about how good this resume is because it's mine. You know, one page, I have a little more on the second page now, that I'm in my 5th year of consulting and I'm co-owner. Like, this goes about a quarter of a way through a second page, but you know, I've done some pretty impressive stuff and I summarize it in a sentence. So, you know, in the middle, one grant and proposal visioning, lead writer for a 240-page bid. That's a really long bid. Like I read all 240 pages several times. And it was $150 million contract, right? That's massive. And even some of these smaller ones, right? $1 million grants, people see that, and people in the field know getting a HRSA grant's a big deal. You know, there's some people, they get one HRSA grant in their professional career and that's it. So this is all just quantifying things and makes it really obvious that we write grants and we do it really well. We won 5 million in grants for last year. That's probably way too low, actually. And so I've got some less formal job related stuff, like public speaking is it's a passion of mine, something I'm pretty good at. And so I say, I had 20 professional conferences in 2019. That ended in 2019, obviously, because I haven't missed many conferences since then, but, spoke at all of those and was featured in a campaign. And so, these are really quantifiable things. And I'm a fairly quantitative person. I realize there's people that want more flowy type stuff. But this is my opinion. And, when I see this, that, hey, we helped develop the second best correctional MAT program in America, like, wow, that stands out. So I keep it pretty simple. I think I've got one other work experience on my second page, but I really keep it to recent work history and very relevant stuff. So my doctorate positions and my healthcare consulting, everything other than that, I leave off. Career goal, I do like that. I like the career goal. And this may be a little bit about the headline later. I want a little bit of career goal, like vision, and a little bit of instrumental, like what you do to achieve that vision. Nothing too fancy as far as format. I maximize my space because I want to keep this as short as possible. Very brief, relevant contact info. Nobody needs your address. In fact, like a lot of places don't want your address, your birthday, or something like that. So this is a great resume. Thanks.
Good work, JK.
I also don't really have anybody to send it to anymore. No, but people do actually ask for bios and resumes a lot, even when you're employed, to win jobs, to if you're going to be a speaker, they want a bio. And so having these things updated and ready, and again on LinkedIn, really, really helpful.
Okay, so the last few slides that we have here is going to engage the group a little bit, and I hope that folks in person can hear us or somehow participate. If not, I do apologize. But what we've done is provide a couple weak examples. And I know why I selected them as weak, but I'm curious if anyone on the call or in the room in Fort Collins can guess why either of these two resumes, Charles or Dirk, are considered weak resumes. Does anyone have any thoughts? Oh, yes, Heather, you nailed it. The font is killing me on Foghorn. That is exactly what I have in my notes, font issues. So I know we are trying to differentiate ourselves from the bajillion of resumes that people are looking at, but you can't do that with font or design. You have to do it with your experience and the language that you choose. So avoid Comic Sans, avoid Papyrus. You want to stick to Times New Roman, Helvetica, Cambria, something like Arial, really easy professional fonts. Anyone have thoughts on Dirk? And I hope you can read it. You'd have to be able to read it. Okay, for the sake of time, I'll just tell us all. Here on his dedication included in qualifications, he says he's dedicated hundreds of hours training in League of Legends, finally reached platinum this November. I am all for being a gamer. I am all for loving extracurriculars. I don't know. Dirk was looking to be a good sales manager, and I'm not sure why he thought that video game hours were relevant there, but they're not. As a manager in the restaurant industry, I one time got a resume. I'm so sorry if this individual is on the call, who didn't have a lot to share. And so instead he listed all of his lacrosse games over the last year in college and identified that he had no dropped balls or no missed tackles on each individual sports game. That is impressive if you are in lacrosse, but I was running a brunch restaurant. So less is better than more, even if you don't have much. Okay, we just have one more round of bad examples and then we'll jump into questions. Does anyone have thoughts on these two? You're right, Heather. If he was applying to be a game tester position, that would have been an excellent bullet point to include. Lisa comments on this man's mug and the graphics. Yes, that's exactly it. So again, as much as we try to differentiate ourselves with graphics and fun things to look at, a really good thing to remember in today's day and age, a lot of large companies use software. I think it's applicant tracking systems, ATS software. If you have graphics that software system can't recognize, then you're just automatically thrown out of the pile. So again, use your language and your specific examples to win them over. Ham Duggo looks like a fun guy, but I wouldn't hire him to work. How about Bill? Bill Jorts. Nice.
The font's too small.
Font's too small, and it's at least 3 pages. So you nailed it on that. The length, it's just too much. I think when I was looking for examples of weak resumes to share, this one was identified as the novelist. So don't be a novelist, and be succinct and direct with your words. And folks, that leads us to our last slide with questions. So
let's start with headline. So great, great idea on LinkedIn. I mean, you have like this one chance to catch somebody's attention on LinkedIn, right? And it's your name, your picture, and your headline, right? It's not even your full headline. It's like probably the first, I don't know, 30 characters of your headline. I mean, this is a tough one, right? Like I said earlier, I want to know a little bit about what people want to do with their career, but I also want to know what they can do, right? Like, what are their skills? This is pretty easy for like data scientists, right? Great data scientist in human services. Okay, great. I understand exactly what you do. And there's 1% of people that might hire you. And when they see that, they're going to reach out with interest because they don't see that very often, right? In public health, that's a little more difficult, especially for people in the more nebulous worlds of community behavioral health, anything that's not hard science, it's not data science or epi. It's harder to differentiate yourself. And so what is mine? I don't even know what mine says. I know my resume says improving the behavioral health of all Americans, which is kind of my career goal or vision. Let's see what I say.
I can share a little bit about what mine says, and I go back and forth about whether I feel good about what mine says or not. So again, as grandma says, fake it till you make it. But I'm a community behavioral healther. I am a qualitative researcher. I have less of these hard skills. One thing that I know I am extremely good at is people and relationship building. So the first thing on my LinkedIn that you see is that people are my passion. And then I kind of expand on how my work as a behavioral health specialist gets to connect to people and the good that I can do with that. And that's not a hard skill. That's not something that you might frequently see on a LinkedIn, but it has served me well thus far. And it really does highlight a strength of mine that I know I can crush. Like, that is a thing that I can do no matter what. And so it's easier to talk about in like in an interview. It maybe gets people's attention, and it's a little bit less mainstream than what you might see. Like, I am a public health professional looking for work.
I just changed mine actually because it said principal for Stedman Group LLC, which no one has any idea what any of that means. Principal is actually pretty nebulous. It usually means co-owner. Stedman Group, nobody's ever heard of us. We're a women-owned healthcare consulting firm. So I just changed that to population health for addiction treatment and recovery. And Jenny says, how far, but I guess the summary on that is, for me, like, if I'm hiring, I want to be able to tell what you do, right? So some skill that you have, even if it's kind of a soft skill, I'd like to see that. And I also want to see what field you want to be in, right? Those are the two things I want to see, is that you care about addictions, or you care about project management and you want to be in addictions, right? Those two, combination of those two things would increase my chances of clicking on you by 100-fold over other people. I also think like, sure, but then there are other people that wouldn't click on you, but I would go for specificity and like getting a dream job over like generality. But that's just me. Jenny says, how far back would you recommend listing job experience on your LinkedIn profile? I mean, LinkedIn, I think you can go back forever and people can just stop scrolling whenever they want. So, as where's your resume, I'd like you to keep it short. I would go back as long as you think it's significant. But again, I'm not going back any further than it has to do with public health or something relevant. So, I think, I guess it depends. If I'm hiring someone senior level who is, 40 or over, I would love to see 10 years of their background because you want to see progressive responsibility, right? For someone who's very senior level. For someone who's entry level or junior, I really would like to see that you've had a job before, but I'm not going to not hire somebody because they haven't been engaged in the workforce for a long time. And so I don't see any downside to listing as long as you can. And I also think, gaps in your resume used to be really looked upon unfavorably. Now with COVID, recognition of, just a lot of disparities in hiring and employment retention, people are much less likely to look down on gaps. And so I wouldn't even worry that much about that as long as, you're willing to talk about it later. So I don't see any downside to putting a lengthy history on LinkedIn.
Yeah, to that note, I'll give some credit to Katie Brumfield, who I think many of you may have interacted with before. She is the career services person at Colorado School of Public Health. And when I was dying over trying to shorten my resume to 1 to 2 pages, she said, LinkedIn is where you can put all of the fun stuff that you want to include on a resume that you think adds value to who you are as a professional, but you can't fit on your resume. So you really can use LinkedIn as a platform to expand upon who you are as a professional person, and use it as like kind of a tool in your tool belt so that an employer who's inquiring about you gets a diverse understanding of who you are by looking at your cover letter, your resume, your LinkedIn profile. And Lisa's got good jokes. Thank you for that, Lisa.
We had another question, and Eric said, any tips on whether to steer away from using past supervisors as a listed reference, even if you think it would be good? So having spoken to a lot of HR professionals, they think references are just garbage, like totally useless. I tend, having done this in different ways, I tend to think the same thing. Like if you can't come up with 3 people who will say something good about you, then I guess it's a good sign that I don't want to hire you. Having, 3 to 5 people who will say, yes, they're a good employee, I would hire them again, doesn't really do much. So I've done different variations of this. I've asked for 3, I've asked for 5. I try to limit my ask to specific things from the reference. I say, here are 3 things I'd like you to comment on, reliability, creativity, and, would you hire this person again? So that it's not such a burden for them. I don't want them to feel like they need to write 2 pages. I want them to just like answer my questions. That said, they always say great things. And this is one of the top 5% of their employees that they've ever had. And so it's not like that big a deal for me. And so who else would you use? Okay.
I mean, sorry. Hi, Eric Moore. I've had other colleagues and peers that, wanted to be, references once they were leaving out. So, I mean, other than supervisors, those are the other people that I know that know my work and might ask for that, or vice versa. I know their work and they need me to help them branch out.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know who else you'd ask. It's a large question of like whether this is worthwhile at all of asking for supervisor. Letters of recommendation for medical school and stuff have no correlation to how smart somebody is, how good a doctor they'll be. Sorry, I'm venting my frustration on you. I would use your past supervisors. I would try to choose some that you think will be really favorable. And I obviously ask them, I'd say, hey, can you write me a very good letter of recommendation? And if they say no, it might just be because they're busy or something. And so I would move on to somebody else. But I would say, can you write me something really good, right? And I would also, this is true for any letter, send them your top 3 or top 5 things you want to be known for. I am, reliable, creative, and very relatable or something like that, right? So that everybody's kind of saying the same thing about you. I think that's helpful, but the main thing is don't have a bad one. Like that would be a disaster. The other thing that I will say, I don't know if this actually correlates with positive job performance. When someone's recommenders respond really quickly, I tend to at least think like, oh wow, they must really like be on board with this person or really want them to get a job or something. Again, no evidence that that's actually true, but I have been more impressed when I hear back from like 4 out of 5 recommenders right away.
There's an interesting conversation happening in the chat around what references are now allowed to or not say about a person that they've employed in the past. I don't know if I've heard any of this, but I'm also not in the market for a new job. I would not be surprised, however, as we move towards more inclusion in the workplace, if that becomes the norm.
That I know that some places have a policy, like their HR just has a policy of, yeah, they'll give like dates worked and, where they like dishonorably discharged. That said, every time I've asked, people have said yes. So I will probably keep doing this, but like I said, this is something I could be convinced to discontinue. I know in healthcare, that's a big thing. It's like, nobody gives recommendations. It's all just, yes, they worked here. Here are the dates they worked here.
Are there any other questions? All right, folks. I'm sorry that we couldn't be with you in person in Fort Collins, but thanks to Lisa and Samantha for making this happen and inviting us, and for everyone's really fun engagement. You made this a fun talk to give, and they're not always like that. So we very much appreciate you. And our emails are included in the second slide on this slide deck. So if you have any questions or you want to follow up, please reach out. We would love to continue the conversation.
Thank you so much, Rhiannon and JK, for presenting. It was super intriguing, very informative. For everybody on the call and here in person, I just wanted to put a little shout outs for some of the announcements happening soon. So this all ties into building your resume, building your network. On March 11th, we are going to have a happy hour, and it's a joint effort with CPHA and the Public Health, Parks, and Recreation. So if you're interested in meeting other people outside CPHA, but still in the realm of public health, that's a great opportunity. That one's March 11th, and it will be in Aurora. The second announcement is we are having an abstract workshop on March 29th. So if you're looking on building your resume through speaking opportunities and presentations, like giving a presentation at Public Health in the Rockies, this is a great opportunity to learn how to write an abstract in ways that you can bulk up abstract writing. And then the third opportunity is to submit an article or piece of artwork or become an editor for Rise magazine. Submit your applications and your submissions by March 31st, and then they'll be reviewed. And the first issue is going to come out on May 1st. So in the follow-up email, we'll send the links to all of those. But thank you everyone for being here, for joining us. It was so much fun. This was great. And then if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to ELC, send your resumes over, cover letters. We're happy to review them. And we'll make sure that you get the email addresses for JK and Rhiannon. So give them a round of applause. Great. Thanks everyone. Have a great night.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone. Happy Thursday.